Hey everybody. Happy. Is it Thursday? Is it Thursday? It's
Yes.
Thursday, right? I think
Yes,
so.
Thursday.
Yeah, this morning it was, and probably until midnight it will be Thursday. Um, Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I've been looking forward to this conversation, well, since Gita and I have been chatting, and I will introduce her in a moment. But this is a unique one, right? We're going to be talking about humor and just how we can apply humor more effectively to the workplace and how important it is in building culture and building connection. Kind of define what it is when we say humor, define how we can use it. We're going to talk about what's potentially too far and why. And Gita is just a very experienced coach at this. She works with tons of companies, helping them bring humor into their workplace. And we all know being funny and laughing is such an important part of life. So I've been super excited about this conversation. So Gita, thank you for taking the time today on this Thursday.
Absolutely.
And I'm just going to turn the mic to you for a moment and ask you to introduce yourself. And within that introduction, I'm also going to ask you, you started and you're the founder of the Humor Edge.
Yes.
What got you into this? So number one, who are you? What are you all about? And why humor? And what sort of drew you into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this is my second foray, my second business. I founded the Humor Edge. We do all things in the kind of, like you said, in the line of humor, which can manifest as funny videos, internal commercials for teams. Everybody deserves a Hollywood moment. It could be just kind of using humor very intentionally, systematically, operationally in the functionings of a team, and then helping CEOs and leaders use humor to show up better, to do things. Everybody, and if you've used humor, it's a strong proxy for a lot of good things, right? It's a proxy for intelligence. It's a proxy for wanting to, it elicits somebody wanting to work with you because it's just something that kind of draws and captivates. So that's kind of what the business is. And I'll tell you what brought me to this place is my prior business. As I said, it was my second foray. Brought me here because I was implementing technology solutions, specifically Salesforce.
That's just humorous. I mean, that's just fun and mad.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's a lot of, they're definitely fun. Yeah. And it's a very technical, set of work. And, a lot of executives, when we bring something like a CRM to the table, it can be daunting. It could be intimidating. It could be not accepted by a lot of different constituencies in the business. And I had to spend a bit of my time using humor to kind of move the needle from transformation to adoption to getting an executive or a sales team to really kind of ingest this tool for what it's worth. And so that was kind of I'd say my first professional start at it. I mean, I will tell you, I've used humor since I was in kindergarten. It was just my currency for getting things in life, from friends to cookies. But I had a strong interplay with it in the business, with the Salesforce business that I had. And that really kind of drew me, and it made me realize, companies, people can use this to effect great things. And it's a place that once you find it within yourself and you harness it and direct it, you can do really phenomenal things with minimal effort, right? So
yes, well, I love that. Thank you, and hi, Sandy. Thanks for saying hi. And anybody who's joining, do feel free to ask questions. We'll keep an eye on chat. Yeah. So coming into this, I felt a little bit. I always consider myself, funny from time to time. I'm like, well, there's a lot of pressure. We're doing an episode on humor. I better have the jokes ready. I'll be judged if I don't.
I know, right?
Exactly.
A lot of people, it's funny that you say that. A lot of people think that even if I get retained to do humor coaching, or when people think of humor, they do, like you said, it's the go-to to go, okay, I've got to be performative in humor. And there's a lot of room for that to not be the case, especially in work. I call it like situational humor. We talked a little bit about it prior conversations. But yeah, you know, you don't, that's a big, I don't want to say misconception, but it's a big conception that people have, that they think, okay, I've got to come into this and juggle or have an arsenal of dad jokes with me or whatever it may be. And that's actually not where we end up to, where the humor really lies. The humor lies in like the interaction, especially in work. There's tremendous opportunity for humor and play.
So kind of a perfect segue, and I guess my first question is, and you know, do you need to inherently be funny to be able to effectively use humor in the workplace? And
yeah.
Well, let me just start with that question, and then I'll have a couple follow-on questions. Because I think some people listening might be wondering, well, I'm not funny, so how am I going to relate to this?
Yeah, so it's a funny question. Do I need to be funny? I mean, we could take this down to even an existential level, right? And we could say, what is funny, right? Because everybody's definition of funny is a little bit different, right? And I think that you're funny. I think everybody's inherently funny. I mean, if you have the ability to, I think there's only like, I think there's 3% of the human population that doesn't have the humor gene or the laughing gene.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah, true fact.
Right.
But I don't know if that's, you know, if there's people roaming the earth just not.
I'm trying to think if I've met a person in that 3% who's just doesn't have the laughing gene. That would be a sad thing not to have.
I know, right? But it's a true story. And funny enough, even more funny or ironic is they've done studies on like Seinfeld and his genetic predispositions, and he has this expression of more humor in his genetic. They have detection markers for this stuff. I'm not to nerd out on this stuff, but yeah. So, but regardless, you know, funny and the definition of funny is so, it's different for everybody. And I think a lot of people think, oh, I need to be, like we said, performative, and I need to be able to execute good jokes, and I need to be able to make people laugh. And the funny, actually, especially when it comes to work, isn't in that expression. It is a little bit, but you can also interplay it with like interactions with humans, or, you know, I'll just give you the driest form. An accountant could find an Excel sheet funny, or a macro funny, or whatever it may be, right? So funny takes a lot of different connotations, and I think it's just a matter of channeling what you find funny, and you will find if you are funny, half of the funny and half of humor is delivery. Yeah. So you can have the driest thing that the world may not find funny, but you just deliver it, or you find it so funny, or you're passionately hanging around it because you find it amusing. The world will find it amusing for those reasons, you know? So anyway.
Yeah, I love that. And do you think a piece of this too is, you know, we talk a lot about in the work that RADICL does, building psychological safety and feeling like you're in a safe environment with your peers, with your colleagues, with your manager, where you can be your authentic self, right? And I think I would assume that kind of needs to be in place before you can truly start to bring, you know, an authentic sense of humor in
yes. Yeah. In fact, you know, so some of the work that I do with executives, it's kind of a funny thing. A lot of them expect that they're going to come into humor coaching and walk out of the room with laughs and guffaws galore, right? When we engage. And the work is actually, half of the work is identifying your sense of funny, and then appealing it to mass audience, right? So I will say that you're right. It's a process of self-discovery. Sometimes even when I guide people through this exercise, I have them kind of look at what they find funny in the world, and that could be a gateway to their internal humor sometimes, right? So different people have different types of sense of humor. Some people like a very playful, overt. I give the example of Kelly Ripa, where she's joking, she's funny, she keeps it light, she keeps it airy. Some people have Aubrey Plaza's humor, which is a dark humor. And then, but it's kind of an intelligent humor, and you see it express a lot in like engineering firms. Engineers have this somewhat savant sense of humor.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then if the other alternative is like a Tina Fey, where I see this a lot with executives, believe it or not. Like a lot of executives have this Tina Fey sense of humor, which is I appeal to masses. I'm extremely intelligent, and I have good good harness of the human language, and I can pick up and express things with good detail, and that becomes really funny. So it's really funny how you can see these different genres of humor show up, and how you work with an executive to uncover what they find, what their style is. And then we kind of harness that and really kind of dial into it. And then you see that expression of funny. They kind of dial into it once they identify it. So,
have you ever worked with an executive or CEO or really anyone who's decided lifestyle change, I'm going to go be a stand-up comedian because you're so good at what you do?
No, they're pretty lucrative at what they're doing. So that hasn't yet happened. I would love to claim that.
That'd be a good case study.
I know, right? I could, Kevin Hart, or Amy Schumer, whomever it may be. I would love that. I would love to be able to claim that. But unfortunately, no. But I will say that the folks that I do work with, once they tap into this and they see and it lands well and they really know how to harness the humor and dial into it to kind of effect engagement and effect inspiration and effect people really being captivated and hanging on to their words, they use it in the daily, in everything that they do. I know I'll nerd out about this for half a second, but it's kind of the last frontier that we just are afraid to go. And especially these days, everything's so polarizing.
Yes.
There's good use of humor, and there's certainly the bad side of humor, right? Which is the offsetting, ostracizing, not creating psychological safety side of humor. We definitely need to point out, and every engagement and set of work that we do when we talk about humor, we always talk about how this can go in the very wrong direction, but how it can go in the very right direction too,
Yeah, and I have I do want to get into that in a moment, because this is, I think, a real interesting topic. Before, I kind of want to talk about it a little bit in the sense of just kind of organizational culture and more around, when we're a team, let's just say we're a team, we're working something, let's use an example of a tech team. We're doing a big implementation, a big launch of a new product, and it just goes sideways. I mean, it goes upside down, it fails, we delete the database behind the scene, as terrible as you can imagine, it happens. So my question is like, when is humor too soon to navigate through recovery? Because I've learned, being a technologist and building product, the most important thing you do in those moments is how you recover, right? Is how, when you fall, how you get back up, how you keep going. And I personally think a part of that is you have to believe in everybody around you, and the way to do that is there has to be a sense of levity, but not pulling away from the sense of importance of what you're trying.
Yes.
So just want to get your thoughts on how you coach around that, and how do you apply humor when stuff is tense and people are fearful.
So it's kind of, I'm a person of many metaphors. I call it the salt on a dish, right? You don't want too much, you don't want too little, just a little dab, and you'll get what you want out of it. I do think there's extreme opportunity in places where there's tension to cut the kind of that tension with humor. That being said, like you said, it's because at that point, let's talk about this from a psychological point of view. Everybody's in a flight or fight mode, right? And everybody's in this kind of paralysis mode. How do you chemically break that? What it is it's a release of cortisol, which stifles people. It paralyzes innovation. It paralyzes productivity. Nobody's thinking about the work. I mean, because everybody's like, this is going in a bad direction. I'm fearful. Your brain is sending it to that paleo reptilian level. It's sending messages going, not good, not working. And a way to really chemically curtail this, and then at a behavioral level curtail it, is with humor. That being said, like you said, just a moment of it, right? I think it's good to call the elephant in the room and to say, hey, this didn't necessarily work in the direction that we were landing, and we get it. And maybe there's a tight joke that can be played there, right? Because it shows humanness. It shows, hey, we're all in this together. And it also gives the chemical passage for you to say, hey, I'm allowing movement, right? And I understand that I'm calling this out. Yep, we made a mistake, or this happened, but now I'm giving you mobility to kind of move forward. So that's a very intentional and good use. Like you said, don't waddle in it, because at that point you're kind of coming into this place where you're losing reputation. You're almost building a little bit of a negative, intent right there. And so, or too much of it. You don't want too much of. You kind of want to learn from the mistake, right? I mean, you want, and that's the intent, is just, hey, I'm going to recognize humor is a great way to kind of interject and then move forward and go, okay, let's get this to the place. Because what you're doing at that point, after you open those channels, you're giving psychological safety back to the organization and to your workers, right? And saying, okay, got it. He realizes this is kind of a mistake. We're making light of it. Humans all make mistakes. And now I'm feeling less in that paralysis state, and I'm ready to kind of execute now. And that psychological safety starts to establish itself.
I love the way you describe that, because it is sort of that chemical release because sometimes a team can be frozen. We don't know what to do.
Yes.
And I think there's science behind it, right? It sort of loosens I certainly won't describe the science anywhere, any sense of being accurate, but I know when there's levity in a moment, a challenging moment, it does sort of loosen the brain a little bit, and it kind of, you can breathe for a moment, and then you can start to think more clearly, and now we can start to problem solve more in a more effective way. But like you said, and like we said when we started this, we don't want it to be used as avoidance or a shield, right?
Yes.
But because if that's all you do, it's like, well, hang on, we gotta start solving too, and so it's balance.
Too much salt, right? It's like too much salt in the dish spoils the dish, right? And it's very much the same. You're right. You can't make the organization and the belief too jokey. I mean, at that point, you're losing reputation. You're losing productivity, right? And people are so caught up in like having fun that they're not caught up in doing the work. So it really is you have to strike a good balance there. I tend to, keep, especially wherever you are in the organization, using it just light. I think the strongest way to do it these days, especially in modern work, is to be light and pithy about it, and then just to move on. Right? People catch that really quickly, and it's the style that I think a lot of people appreciate, because the audience or the receptor, the person receiving the humor, just wants to see that quick and then go on. It's just how our mind has been trained these days. We very quickly process the data set, and then we go, right? So, God, this time's going so fast. There's so much we could talk about. This is what happens. Every time we've chatted, it's like, I know.
We'll have to do a part 2 when we get done with this. I kind of want to get into some, I guess, conversations about. And you brought it up earlier, kind of the polarization that exists, and sort of what someone might find funny and someone doesn't find funny, and when does that, I don't know, that personal responsibility come into how I use humor? I mean, obviously it's awareness, it's paying attention to people around you, but some people aren't as capable at that and reading the room. And we had a great conversation about this last time, sort of, there are teams when you know each other so well and you know everything about each other, and you can go a little more of a classic roast, right?
Yes.
But that's fine. And again, because it's all with good love and good spirit.
Yes.
But that can be probably a little dangerous if you're in a town hall meeting with 600 people online. And then the final thing is because of the polarization, whether it be political or social issues, do you typically say just kind of don't go there with humor, or I'm just curious, because this is a big one, I think, I suspect, for those listening.
Yeah, absolutely. So to give you kind of, let me see, this is okay, good. Yeah. And this is going to apply to whether you're a stand-up comedian or you're, the gentleman in finance running doing work and wanting to apply some humor and levity into what you do. There's the joke, and the joke is in this little circle. And the reason that a joke doesn't land in a circle, whether you're the comedian or the auditor, is one of three things. People don't understand, people don't relate, or people don't, they're offended.
Right.
These are the real reasons why people won't laugh at a joke, right? Or won't get a joke.
Yeah.
So I always, use a litmus against that. It's kind of my rubric, if you will, to kind of say when not to use, or if I've got something that I want to put out there as a story, or even coach my executives, and they say, hey, I want to put this as my story, interweave it into the top of the keynote. We do substantively go through that content, and we look at it and go, okay, will this offend? Will this confuse? Or will this, people not get it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the strong way to play, it's, and this even applies to the self. I'll give the example of like sarcasm, and knowing your audience, right? And knowing that your audience knows who you are.
And to interrupt real fast, you're in Houston, Texas.
I'm in Houston.
So when you say so you live and breathe in the South. So
yes. Yeah. So there's a lot. Yeah. There's even dynamics around, industry dynamics, right? Some industries are a little bit more receptive to humor, but then there's this other side of the world that's so industry, proximity, location, what part of the world you live in. There's cultural sensitivity to this stuff. So there's a lot of things you have to take advantage of. Status, what is it called? Social status. I believe it or not, I have coached executives who typically you'll see an executive high achiever, some of them gone to Ivies, right? And they want to do jokes around like they're like, hey, when we were all playing rugby, and I'm like, no, like people don't all, like X% of the population plays rugby, and we won the championship, and remember when that, and they just go deep into that world, and the audience is like, I'm not picking up what you're putting down, right? And that's that whole I don't understand, I don't relate. So that's one thing. There's the other side of it, which is sarcasm, use of sarcasm. I typically guide people to use sarcasm only when they are 100% confident that they're a known entity and their status is established, right? And sarcasm to self, not sarcasm to others. You can't actually do sarcasm at the executive level. There's a known punch down. You can't punch down.
Yeah.
That is very unaccepted, as a executive leader, right? You can never use and I typically pull that away from the executives. If there's any sarcasm, even at self, even at, well, definitely not at constituency, but those who follow. But unless they're just a tight knit group and they've been operating for years and years and years, and they know each other and they're like brothers and sisters to each other, I just don't tend to have them use that coming out of the gate. Because sarcasm, especially, like, I'll give you the play where I would use it a lot. I mean, this is a series of my failures to some degree too. I would walk into rooms thinking people knew I was the owner of the company, and I'd have my team running an implementation, and I would say, hey, I'm going to ask a dumb question. And people would be like, they would latch onto the fact that I just said, I'm going to ask a dumb question. They wouldn't even be latched onto the question. They'd be like, okay, she's asking a dumb question. And they wouldn't know who I was. And then they would, turn around and be like, hey, can you get me the coffee? And I'm like, well, actually, I'm not the, I'm kind of, and so that's a great example of, like, people may not know in the room who I am, and it's therefore more important to kind of be real sure.
I guess the alternative would be to be super confident and come in and say, I'm going to ask a highly intelligent question of you all.
Yeah, you could. It's a positioning thing, right? It's a delivery.
Right, people would be, okay, this person's a little overconfident. So and sarcasm is, I think that's an interesting one. And I think that, like you said, that typically should be used on yourself, not sort of on other people. Because you're truly, like, it's, again, unless maybe, like you said, or we talked about earlier, you're in a super closed room. But even then, you have to be careful with how you use it. I mean, words, and I think this is the other thing, words have power,
They
right?
do.
I mean,
Yes.
we know this.
Yeah. Which is also a great thing, right? Words have power, as you mentioned, like you can do a lot, right? And that breaking of bread and knowing that we share commonality with words does a lot, right? I make the comment, sometimes when I work with organizations, I find that commonality, I strike it pretty quickly because we'll speak and there's so much inherent, there's so much inherentness that comes through knowing that somebody maybe likes Ted Lasso, right? And if I like Ted Lasso and you like Ted Lasso, we can actually talk in terms of Ted Lasso with work, believe, right? And use his Ted Lassoisms, and that becomes, it just becomes, and then because of that, you have a belief that like I have a lot of the value set that Ted Lasso has, right? And that kind of allows good working relationship to develop. And I always say, if you can laugh together, you can work together. It's like,
well, and it's kind of like it's funny that you mentioned Ted Lasso too. I reposted something that someone put together, 10 quotes that have helped me be an effective leader. It was just some random, it came up in my LinkedIn feed. And it was like, it gave me goosebumps reading it. And some of them were super, of course, I mean, they were funny, but some of them were, as the show is, very, heartfelt. It's a blend between ridiculous, funny, and heartfelt, but it works. And I think by sharing comedy and what you find funny and what's important to you also gives a little piece of who you are and allows people to get to know you, right?
Yes.
Just like music or art or film, like if you and I are having a conversation and I want to talk to you about a film that I like, it's, again, I'm not suggesting you will like this or should like this, but I want you to know why I like it because that helps you to get to know me.
Value. Mm-hmm. It proxies into your value and proxies into your value set. Yeah, absolutely. I always say humor is really efficient like that. And we can even use the example. I was in the room yesterday with a group that did a lot of video game work, right? And played video games. And I admittedly have stopped playing at Pac-Man, so don't judge me. I am not the video person.
I love Miss Pac-Man. That is my favorite game. I can sit back and play for like 45 minutes on one.
We're showing our 1982-ness, but I will say that they will talk about like the Final Frontier. I don't even know what, but they will, that metaphor and just playing Zelda and all these games, they would talk in that language, right? And they would be like, oh yeah, like in Zelda, and they would blah blah blah. I don't even know, But like I said, it's an efficiency thing, and you can start to. That's part of some of the work that we do that allows that bond. We find that kind of uniqueness amongst teams, or you do it with anybody that you interact with. You find that commonality, and you use that. You latch onto it. It also becomes the basis for how you interface with them. It just does a lot to solve a lot of gaps, because we as human creatures we are trying to, every time we do interactions with a team or a person, we're looking for them to make sense in our world, and the more context clues we have, the better we have. And if you can intentionally paint it in the lens of humor, you have positive association, positive cognitive bias then for that person. And if you do it, if I apply humor to you, I'm giving you positive cognitive bias, and you always think of me as, okay, she's a joy to work with, or I feel safe to admit around her. And so therefore I will tell her, oh, this has strong legs in business, right? This is maybe not the best idea, or this is a great idea, and let's take this next level. And I'm accepting of your idea because I find you funny, so you know what I mean? Like, think of humor and the openness that it affords you,
That mic drop, everything you just said, that is so spot on. Because I think humor gives us permission, right? Permission to connect more, to find likeness in each other and things that we can relate to.
Say things sometimes.
Yeah, and that makes incredibly productive, happy, joyful, a part of what we're in, successful, which is a part of our title today, right? And how do we infuse or ignite humor to drive joy and success in the organization or team, or really in life for that matter. But so I love everything that you just said. So spot on. There's some tweets or threads. Or some threads that I found that we could pull out of that last.
Well, I mean, you know, I even use it in the reverse correlate. I actually will say when we're in places of strong tension, you can see it. You can cut it in the room and you can see everybody scared. A failed implementation or just a rough thing that the team's gone through, right? We need to reestablish some safety. I will, and we're going through, and we need to do innovation. So I've had this where even an impossible idea, like people will say, hey, we need to go to Europe, or we need to establish a point of presence in Europe. The team, I can see it. You can just read it and you can see the team. There's some people that are leaders and will always be vocal about their expression. And then there's not some that just are those silent ones that never speak. If they do speak, it's a great thing. And then there's some that just won't speak at all because they just don't feel safe, right? And so I even take the notion of humor and playfulness and levity and I flip it. And I'll be like, okay, we need to do this thing. We need to go to Europe, or we need to look at an idea. What's the stupidest thing, or what's the most ridiculous thing that we could do to address this? And people, if you actually give them the ability to kind of say, okay, we're in land of play and I'm going to assume that, let's go, they are so much more able to express. And you can take it for everything that is kind of absurd. Number one, we don't know. My definition of what's absurd and what your definition of what's absurd could be vastly different, often is. And then you take that and you go, okay, let's flip that. And like between every absurdity, there's great genius. You know, I have this belief, and I think it stands true. I mean, PayPal, Amazon, all these were coming from completely what one would see at Optic crazy ideas. And people kind of said, okay, what's impossible? And let's flip that now and make it possible. So I use humor not just in the classical sense, but I use elements of humor and I say but anybody can do this, right? If you feel like you're tasked with an impossible thing, think about it from the impossible, right? So.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, we touched on that when we chatted last too, just the, it helps drive creativity. I mean, 20 years ago, imagine if someone brought up the idea of what Facebook would be. Mm-hmm. We're going to build a platform where there's billions. It's bigger than many countries combined.
Right.
They're connecting and they're doing, you know, everything that people would be like, what do you even what? Like,
right.
I'm going to pick up my rotary phone and call somebody. Just that concept and that vision, right?
Yes.
Or even the vision of the iPhone, right? I mean, the vision of this.
Yes.
It's like I'm sorry,
a
supercomputer, like where just the concept might have seemed humorous to somebody if they brought it up in a pitch. And so I think it does break down those barriers of creativity. And so that's like a whole nother conversation we could talk about with
yes.
how humor can drive, I think, drive things forward and drive change.
Oh, yeah. It has huge
creation.
Absolutely. I mean, I could go, yes. It's funny. I think there's so many unanswered questions in business today that could, if people had safety and the ability to emote about this stuff and maybe use it in the grounds of levity, we would see massive innovation that happens. I mean, you think about Uber, right? Somebody's like, hey, how about I use my car and I just put a little sign on there and I make myself a taxi, right? I mean, people just
it's true.
Think
about that idea pitch when it came out, like, how about we just hire people with their own cars and they can go pick people up and drive people around and drop them off? You're like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, right. There's so many like things that our mind wants to go to, but if you just kind of, like I said, assume it in the land of play and just go imagine it with this, I think businesses are ripe for this stuff, and it's so healthy for the mind. It's so healthy for the mind. It is so healthy for business. It unleashes this different level of operating mechanics for the team, but then it also unleashes this level of innovation that kind of stacks upon that, right? Because when I'm safe, I'm going to tell you, we're going to really jam well together. We talked about this, right? As human, if we were to play together in music, you have to
find
that rhythm with your team. And when you find that rhythm, it's a whole different set of music that gets emitted versus and business product that gets emitted versus those that just kind of come together to work, right? Because I'm actively listening to you, because I'm looking for commonality, and I'm looking for how I'm going to interweave my work product with your work product, right? And anyway.
I mean, I love that music analogy and finding that rhythm. And if you think about like some of the best jazz and like the way, that flows, and the solos of jazz flow is so much about listening and trusting and sort of, and just feeling, right? Because you kind of know, like someone's going to go a little longer, you go, 12 more bars because it's just on fire, and I can feel it and I know it, and it's just unspoken. And I think it's that same sort of thing with humor in a team, and just, so yeah, we could go on, and I know we're already, we're about 40 minutes in. So I want to, so this was awesome. I thank you for all the work you do. I mean, and what you do is so unique. And I've been working in the culture and tech and talent and HR space for, I don't know, 20 plus years. And it's rarely brought up. We obviously talk about, being lighthearted, but it's never really a focus. Like let's bring humor into the workplace. That's never a priority, HR. It's never a priority across senior leadership. And it absolutely should be, for all of these reasons that we talked about today. I mean, you sold, anyone listening to this, I'm confident is very sold.
Yeah, I mean, it does a lot. I mean, it's good for business. It's good for the soul. And we all know there's a huge movement for social impact, social good in corporate America, right? Or corporate land. I mean, we won't even call corporate America. So I think it's, like you said, I mean, there's so much room for it. And it's like you said, it's effortless. Once you produce and you jam together and you jam together as a team, you untap a different level of innovation that you just don't get. Yeah.
You kind of like you unleash it to some degree. You sort of you amplify it. It's sitting there, it's dormant, and you sort of let it loose. And I think that's awesome.
Just to kind of capture, I mean, you think about America, like you think about our world today, we are highly socially connected systems, but we are highly kind of isolated as right? And this really does a lot to further that, because if you even as a unit of one, if you can't feel within yourself, joy, how are you going to emit that and kind of bring that together for collective creation, right? Yeah. It's a huge way to engage people and keep them captive, right? Anyway, I'll leave it there.
Well, that's again, thank you, and I am, for those listening, you already know how to connect, because you're here, so you'll by default you've seen the post and you've seen a link to your LinkedIn. Those who will be watching after the fact, look up or look down, because there will be a link to your LinkedIn profile, and I suspect it's okay if folks reach out to you.
Absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn, as you mentioned, and happy to schedule some time to just kind of chat through what you're kind of, where there's so many applications of this. So yeah. Perfect.
And is there any other website, or is LinkedIn the best forum for folks to get in touch?
LinkedIn, I mean, we certainly have a website, The Humor Edge. You can reach us through that. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but I will claim that my strongest point of presence is really in the LinkedIn realm. My thought leadership is probably persistent there more so than it is in the other two avenues. I can only be so many places and so many times.
It's true. Well, it's funny how the different platforms do serve a different purpose. Where LinkedIn is a whole other conversation, I suppose. Like LinkedIn might seem less humorous. Like in Instagram, you can post funnier things or memes or things that might make you laugh more. And on LinkedIn, it feels a little bit awkward, maybe.
Yes.
It's interesting how they can serve different purposes when it comes to humor with similar connections.
Right. Yeah.
That's like a whole, like talking about social media and humor.
Yes, there is. And it's like a branding impact, right? Like what impression do you want to leave on different platforms? There's so much impression management, right? So
Absolutely. Well, thank you. This was so much fun.
yeah, I loved it, Dan.
And
So
again, please reach out to Gita, and there will be links. If you have questions, reach out and bring humor into the workplace. If there's one thing that you take away of what someone can do starting tomorrow in their workplace, just to sort of start to bring in a little more humor into their day, what can they do? Just do,
so much. I'll give you just two. I'd say look for those intersections of joy and laughter that you can find within your team, and be that change agent. And if you need to, look for it, try it within yourself. Like watch a little bit of humor if you need to. I do it on the daily. It keeps you up, it keeps you light, it keeps you top of your game, and you subliminally will bring it to the business, and people gravitate towards it.
Yeah, well, I love that, and I think and never taking ourselves all too seriously, like we said, finding humor in yourself, and I think that's a great trait, and especially in leadership or really anybody. I mean,
Yes.
just being able to laugh at moments and it's healing, right? It's medicine. It's natural.
It is.
Natural medicine, like you said. It's there's science behind it, and there's
It's, believe it or not, the same. When you laugh, you're using the same. I forget they call it gamma. The meditation. The same things that you're releasing in meditation. That same effect is kind of happening in the place when you laugh. So think of it as meditative to laugh, and you'll get those same effects. Especially those. I mean, if you watch people that are highly successful, they've got this stuff in them, and they're living life through that lens. So this isn't as foreign and as taboo or as wrong or unaccepted as it seems. And people will remember you for that more so than sometimes even the substantive work that you're doing. So
yeah, well, love that, and I'm going to keep my eye open for the 3% of people who can't laugh.
Yeah, right. I know the one. I know.
I'm gonna try so hard to make them laugh. I'm just going to do joke after joke.
I know. You're like, were you in that 3%? Were you, right? Are you in that?
Exactly. That's. I mean, the odds of running into someone in 3%. Statistically speaking.
I've been told they're in Pennsylvania. So
anybody listening, no offense to Pennsylvania.
I don't know.
But maybe it's not the funny. I mean, it's a curvy state. There's a lot of windy.
It was true. It was a true, it's really funny because it was something about it. Please understand, people migrate. So don't take this for true, literal, But at the time, they did the study, they had found a lot of strong population, and I don't know, we're not going to go deeper on this, but it just was, and there's nothing against Pennsylvania. I have nothing against Pennsylvania. I would like to believe that those in Pennsylvania would find that pretty funny. Tell me, be like, I'm not that person, or
we're not funny in Pennsylvania. There's a hashtag.
Right? Exactly. Right. I don't know. But true.
A ranking of states that would be like, I wonder where Minnesota falls.
I'll go. See if there's like a funny state thing. I feel like I've seen something like that before.
It probably is.
Yeah. So I know somebody's going to write us later and be like, okay, I am that one person, or I know, and I guess they live in, I don't know, Scranton. I don't even know, but I'm just so.
Well, thank you again. Amazing conversation. Thank you for the work you do, and thanks to the community and everybody listening. Our country's someone from Germany on. Look at this.
Germans don't make jokes.
Well, I don't know. I
feel so bad. we've created this.
I think that's a whole nother conversation. I think that In business, that's probably true. That was a joke.
I know. I knew it was a joke. I knew, and I think if I'm reading the name right, Olga is in fact German, so she can say that.
Yes, I know.
Right?
I know Olga, and I know
right.
that when we've chatted, she's you've made jokes, so I can't possibly be.
Oh, she's Dutch. Okay.
Oh, you're Dutch. I
The
thought.
whole Dutch
Oh
thing.
my gosh, I'm just like completely. Yes.
Well, the funny part is that
do Dutch make jokes?
Yes, the Dutch make jokes about Germans because, in fact, my mother is Dutch, so I can say this with full credence that there's a whole thing that's going on there. So it actually, funny enough, when we go to Amsterdam and we encounter Germans and we do joke with them about just certain things that they are and certain things that we are, right? Though there's a lot of a lot of generalizations that you can make about the Dutch and the Germans. I won't even go there. It's like coming into the land of, scariness, but it's also a way to break bread. I mean, people do it, especially because Europe is a land of many different subcultures, right? So that's a cute way to kind of break bread. It is definitely a break bread experience.
I was in a room. I will end with, I won't give too much detail about this, but I'll end with this, take it as a joke or reality. I was in a room with a large European client. Because I spent a lot of my time in Europe. There were probably representatives from about 30 to 35 countries. Mm-hmm. And it was a full day kickoff meeting, and it was the day after Donald Trump won the first election. So I literally showed up that morning. I was the only American in the room. And it was a global audience, representation across Asia and Europe, and showing up, and there was confusion, and there was questions, and there was some comments, and it was just, and I'm not going to get into.
You were like the ambassador at that point.
I was literally the first 4 hours. I was like on display for just start answering questions. What is this? How did this happen? And it wasn't even, people weren't even wondering, like, because people didn't quite know. They just thought it, like, no, of course Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. Everyone just assumed that. And so it was just this, and it was this really interesting moment of all these different cultures and trying to leverage humor through where some people were scared, some people didn't know what it meant, some people were happy, but it was just really.
It's fascinating. It's a great
moment, and in many ways, not the being with those people was a dream.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's strong. I mean, it's funny when you go abroad and you're presenting and you're, especially in the work. I mean, there's so much associations, right, that an American has with travel because. And I would find that, like, they would know more about sometimes the stuff that was going on. They would fact check my, I'd be like, oh, I didn't know, or in key things, and it's fascinating, right? And I think that that's one thing that when you're doing a lot of that cross-cultural jokes are a great place to land with some of that stuff, because a lot of that stuff that becomes very known, especially in some of these countries, like, I fully admit, and maybe Olga will claim or deny, but there's a long-standing joke with, like, Dutch people being cheap or Dutch people going Dutch, right? And so we joke about that, and it's fun ways to kind of bond and know people and
absolutely. I mean, of course, and I think that's where, just feeling safe and being able to sort of use funny, stereotypes that aren't offensive and just kind of playful. And I think that's exactly right. I mean, there's plenty of jokes that were made about being American when I spent half of my time in.
Right. I mean, you can play with it, like, and especially if it's not, it's kind of a safe place to play because you're not attacking a person's creed or status or something. You're just kind of making a funny, lighthearted, and not personal, sometimes not personal attack on the person, right? So it's kind of it's a safe.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's one of those areas where we use the the inside outside circle. Like, okay, can we joke? Can we go there? Would we offend? Would we confused? Would we?
Yeah, would it land? Would they understand?
Would land? Yeah, exactly, right. So it's definitely one of those places that, and if it's full admission, we know I'll know going into a room like, okay, everybody's Scottish, and this is kind of the running joke with the Scots, and we'll talk, but I do make sure I've got credence to kind of go there, and I would advise that with every cross cultural border thing that you're doing, you just want to be sensitive to that stuff. So
well, awesome. We just can't stop. We just keep.
I know, right?
And Olga, thank you for your comments. And Olga, I will reach out to you. I know we need to catch up too. So thank you for the comments. And Sandy, and I know there's a handful of people on. So yeah, reach out. Thank you again. Have an amazing rest of the Thursday, and we'll be in touch soon. And thanks to the community. And again, be funny, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
See you, everyone.
Bye.